Welcome, everyone. I'm Mary Ann. I'm the one who's waving on your screen with Stoppel Analytics Group, and I am really honored to have a guest appearance by my buddy, Maya Gasuk of West Wind Consulting. Maya is an intuitive and brilliant annual fund consultant who loves the idea of problem solving. When we were at Cornell together, she would just walk into my office and tell me, look, don't give me these kind of prospects, give me those kind of prospects. And we did, and then she raised a crap ton of money. So ever since then, she's been leaned upon by lots of different kinds of organizations to support their efforts. And so today, we're because Maya is very good at handling situations under stress, we asked her to talk about how to handle the situation under stress. There are 17 days left in our fiscal year. How do we meet goal? Thank you, Maya.
All right. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I can't see most of you, but I'm hoping that if you have a question as we go, that you'll jump in and interrupt me. I am not offended at all by that, and happy to just talk through anything as we go. I guess, as Marianne said, I am a consultant and I have done a lot of annual fund work. I will tell you that at this very moment, I'm actually running an annual fund on behalf of a client. And so I am still very much in the reality of the June 30th deadline and watching all the data and pulling the reports and freaking out and trying to move everything that I can. So the advice that I want to give you today in terms of thinking about how to manage what you have is based on things that I've learned about working in an annual fund and meeting those deadlines going back to, sad to say, the late 80s. So this is hard learned information and hard fought, I would say. So where I want to do is to just hone in on strategy, because it can get super stressful and there's a point where you start running around and just trying everything, right? Because you're just desperate to make things happen. But I think it's really important to go back to the core principles and always stay focused. When I work with clients, the thing they tell me all the time is, if I could just focus on the things I know will deliver results, that's really what I need to do. And it's really kind of applying that discipline to the work that we do. So let's just start with the basic element of what we know, which is how gifts are in fact given. So how many of you, if you wave at me, know the 80-20 principle? Most of you are off camera because you're probably eating lunch. I'm very jealous, but does the 80-20 rule apply, or is it familiar to you at all? Even if you send me a little signal in the chat. Looks like a few, yes, okay. This is really, I mean, most of the time we're trying to do everything, right? Our managers want us to raise money and also want us to deliver donors. But the reality is you can't spend donors, you can spend the money that you raise. So usually the highest pressure point at this moment is meet your donor goal. So when we go back to the core principle of 80% of the money comes from 20% of the donors, and for many nonprofits nowadays, it's 95-5, right? 5% of the donors are really driving it. The reality is, you all need to have a gift table that supports what you're doing, and you need to know who those top prospective donors are. Now, there can be times where you'd love to have a $10,000 donor and you don't have one. Well, that means now you need more at the $5,000 level, right? But going back and looking at that top group of candidates and figuring out what gifts you need in order to hit these goals is really, really important. So because I know there's a mix of organizations that participate in this chat, I just threw a very general $80,000 annual fund gift table together. You could add a zero to this if you wanted to. You could add 2 zeros to this. And we've got a comment here from Greg. Very large institutions were at 97.3 or 98.2. Yes, that can absolutely be true. I have a client right now where their lead gift is a 9-figure gift. And the balance of the campaign is everybody else. But we also know that in the long game, we really do have to manage both ends. But annual funds are not radically different in many ways. We do typically have 1 or 2 key supporters, but if we just rely on them every single year and don't groom the next level down to start to make that support, we also create some problems. but we've got 17 days to go and we really don't have time to overthink it, right? So the first thing to think about is, do I know who I was planning to ask at the highest levels of support? So do I have that list of names? Have I asked them, or has someone who's supposed to be doing the ask them? And if not, can I prod them, or can I take it back and do it myself? And have they given? So that's really the core questions to focus in on right now. Whatever the top of your gift table is, whether it's $10,000, $1,000, $100,000, or $1 million, who are those people, or in some cases entities, and has that ask happen? So that would be the first place to start. The second, of course, is really about what method of asking, right? Because the issue is lots of people will volunteer to help in the last moments of a campaign or in any annual fund program. But the thing is, if they just send another email, that doesn't necessarily help you, right? So here's all the different ways that we might ask for a gift. Does anybody have an opinion to drop in the chat of which one of these is the most effective? I'm just keeping an eye on the chat to see if anybody's got an answer or reaction to this. Which one of these is going to work best? Okay, I see it. It depends on the audience. Others? A mix of methods. Okay. We've got a couple of different places we can look at for this. Okay. Let's actually look at the efficacy here. So let's assume that we're talking about a donor who made a gift last year, which is a really good candidate, right? We're all talking about last year, but unfortunately not this, Libunts, right? Usually that's the first place we go with 2 weeks left to go in the fiscal year. And if it's 2 weeks left to go in a fiscal year, you're trying to do probably the most likely to support you. So if I'm going to ask a Libunt, here are the actual effective rates for each of them. If I talk to you in person and you made a gift last year, I've got probably a 50% chance of a yes, or even perhaps 60% chance of a yes from you. If I get you on the phone, now I'm going to note if I get you on the phone, but if, again, this is a leader, one of your top donors, and you have a relationship with them, if I can get you on the phone, I've got a 30 to 50%. And again, if you're talking about, some folks are talking about in person for major gift, but even major gift prospects, I should be able to secure about a half the time a yes from you. If I send you a letter and you're a Libunt, it can be anywhere from 2.5% to 10%, depending on the efficacy of your mailing. So if you sent a letter out somewhere a few weeks ago, you can only assume about 10% of your Libunts are going to give if you're doing well. And it also depends on how long ago you sent that mailing. If you sent that mailing June 15th for June 30th, you're actually in trouble because your mailing curves typically require 8 weeks. So if you want June 30th gifts to come in by mail, you better be mailing that thing by May 1st to be the most effective it can be. An email is 0.1% response rate. Let me say that again, 0.1. So if you're just sending an email out and hoping that people will give, you're only going to get a donor for every 100 you send if you're lucky. And again, a donor or two for every 1,000 you send. And social media, not going to do it for you. So if you're really trying to make sure that you get in that 5%, 3%, whatever top percent of your gift table that it is, you're really going to want to make sure that you try to do as much in-person, Zoom, or phone as you possibly can in the next 2 weeks. Questions, reactions, thoughts? You all might be pulling your lists. Where are these percentages from? These percentages are from working with lots and lots of clients over the years, and in fact, from my own work with annual funds as a practitioner myself. In fact, depending on, again, the effectiveness of the person, is there any difference between a personalized email and a mass email? Not much. So if I know you well, so for example, just a few weeks ago, I had a client where the annual fund director put out a call to her colleagues to help with some annual fund solicitations for $10,000 plus donors to help get them renewed so that they could hit their revenue goal. Totally appropriate thing to do. Several gift officers decided to take what I'll call the easy route and do emails that were from them. Fine. A couple of them forgot to include the link to the gift page. That was a big mistake. But even though they had a personal relationship, they sent an email. They got no gifts from them. The other gift officers that actually picked up the phone and called the donors that they have a relationship with and said, hey, I know you normally give by June 30th. I know you normally do this. I hope that you'll join the blah, blah, blah society with a gift of blah, 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 actually got those donors to renew. So that is the difference. Generally emails, look, we're all reading emails on one of these phones, which you can't even see right here. And we're going swipe, right? We're swiping stuff and getting rid of it quickly. We all apparently now have the attention span of a goldfish. So when you call on when you're on an email, you're done and that's it. So it doesn't matter. You've really got to make that personal touch. That's the only way you're going to break through what everybody else is doing. What is the effectiveness of crowdsourcing websites? Not much. First of all, you're going to spend so much time putting that together, and then you're going to spend a ton of time promoting it and marketing it, and you're still going to get a couple donors, and then those donors will probably not renew the subsequent year. And so if you've done all of that work, frankly, in that same amount of time, you could have picked up the phone and called the 20 people that would have been your top donors and generated more revenue that will be likely to sustain and keep those donors on their philanthropic journey as leadership supporters for you. That's great. Keep firing questions at me. This is good.
So sorry, I have a question. So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that this is almost the opposite of what I hear our clients talk about. Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure that the money will come in, right? Or we just have to push another mail out. The piece about you get 50% in person, if I've got to be in person, I've got to hop on a plane. So I'm still losing time, right? And I have to wonder, like, what is the, one of my clients is doing the year-end scramble. And one of the things that we did is, hey, these are the, here's our analytics, here are the prospects that are most likely to give, get on the phone with them.
Yeah.
And is that part of what you advocate for?
Yeah. So it's like I said, in person is 50% or higher.
Yeah.
And again, if you have a very top end donor that drives your results, right? So you have maybe a trustee or something that's giving the very largest gift, maybe some annual funds get 7-figure gifts. And that person hasn't yet renewed. That still might be worth hopping on a plane. But for the balance of them, a Zoom call or a phone call making up the difference, you get pretty close to that 50% if you have a good relationship and you're used to talking to them about their support. So those are really the two, with 2 weeks left to go, that's where I would put your energy. Now, if you've got a decent sized file, you're still going to send emails at the very end, right? The thing is, we can send a lot of emails. The email that's going to get the best results is the one that you send on the very last day, sadly on June 30th at probably 9 a.m. that says, if you've been meaning to make a gift to organization, now's the time, box. That's it. And you can send it from you as the lead fundraiser. And I would keep it that short. And if you can put in the subject line, my name, Maya, now's the time, that's really what's going to get my attention. But that's the email that'll generate the most for you. You'll get 1 or 2 gifts if you start sending them across the month of June. The one on June 30th, because everyone's a procrastinator and email inherently is deadline driven, is the one that will do the best for you. So save yourself time, grief. Don't write a long message. Don't make it a big deal. But don't rely on that, because it's still going to get you some gifts, but they're not going to be the gifts at the top of your gift table, which is going to get you to your monetary goal. What trends do I see regarding major gift donors making an annual gift also? The trend, this is a cultural issue, not a trend issue. In organizations that fully embrace the power, significance, and importance of the annual fund, major gift donors will continue to support it because that message comes at all levels of the organization for its importance and value. If you have an organization where your CEO isn't behind it, your board isn't behind it, or your staff partners aren't behind it, you will not see the same level of participation in annual fund support in addition to the special gifts a donor makes. It really comes down to the messaging and the commitment of the organization to its value and how you talk about it. And for year end, is there any strategy around the person who has made a major gift, but not the annual fund gift, I'm assuming is the question. If you have a good relationship with that donor and they've made a gift to a special project, I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone if they've been a supporter in the past. It says, I know you just made this commitment for this wonderful project. I'm hoping that you'll continue to support the annual fund. An episode of The Hidden Brain agrees with a simple one argument approach. I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming that it's probably one request at the same time, which in most cases I would agree with. The idea that you are talking to a donor about, their annual fund support as part of their commitment to the organization, that makes a lot of sense, right? So to say to me, let's just say I've been supporting some particular nonprofit for years, and you come to me and say, hey, Maya, I know you've been a loyal supporter of the annual fund, and I hope you'll continue to make your gift as part of our campaign for whatever. I'm hoping you'll up that a little bit and join the blah, blah, blah society, in addition to investing in this thing that that I care deeply about. And if I do care deeply about both the ongoing functioning of that organization and the success of this special initiative that you've started, I'm going to say yes to that. But it is a lot harder if you put out a proposal and make a whole bunch of hoopla about the special thing and then go, oh, right, annual fund. That inadvertently sends a signal about what you value, right? But if somebody has gone ahead and made that commitment and you've got to backfill it, you want to step in and backfill it. The thing that you want to think about is, what's your case for that? This morning on our local public radio station, I was wanting to scream because they were doing a pledge drive. And their pledge drive was, well, it's June 30th coming up soon. It's the end of our fiscal year, and we need an infusion of cash. And I'm like, that's the crummiest case in the world. Who cares? I don't care that you need cash. Tell me what you're going to do. I see Marianne laughing in the background, but that's not a legitimate case. Your deadline does not matter to me. What you do, the impact you have, is what matters to me. So if you're reaching out to me to say, it's our fiscal year ends in a few weeks, tell me more, right? So right now we're in the process of budgeting for next year, what we're going to be able to invest in to do whatever your mission is. And, your gift today is really going to help us set the tone for what we're going to be able to do and plan for in the fall. Great. But have that rationale in front of you, because donors are less interested in your deadlines and your goals than they are in your mission and their impact. Okay, so if I were thinking about the gift table and the methods to create a plan of action, here's what it might look like. So you've got at the top, you want to probably assume that you need to ask at least 3 people for every gift that you need when you know those donors well, and 5 people for every gift that you need when you don't know them well. So in other words, you're kind of speculating a little bit. And as much of that is you can make as personal by phone or in person, if it's a small community nonprofit, do that as much as you can. And if there's too many on your list, obviously it's a little too late for it now, but normally you would want to send a mailing early May, let the mailing do its work, and then do some personal follow-up for anything that's still missing. And then obviously the middle of your gift table, again, whatever gift table size you have, if you've got your mailing going out, you're still going to do a little bit of personal follow-up as you have time. It's not urgent. And at the base, obviously, same thing. You're going to need to think about, you can definitely send an email. And I would send an email to everybody who has not yet given on, your June 30th date, and keep it short and sweet, and you'll get a couple gifts, and that'll be great. But that's not going to necessarily push you to make your goal. So this is just another, again, way of looking at that $80,000 gift table model. So the idea of doing personal solicitations for this particular nonprofit down to about $500 is what will make sense for them. Your gift table will be shaped differently, but if you know who your potential donors are, that you need to ask at the highest level, focus in on what you can. The other thing that I coach a lot on this time of year is people will sometimes get in a habit of calling. They put on their calendar to make calls at 11 o'clock every day for an hour to make themselves do that. Okay. The problem is, depending on who you're calling, that may be a terrible time. So you need to really think about, as you're doing those call attempts, doing some early in the morning, doing some in the middle of the day, doing some in the evening, doing random points in time. And if to the degree you know that person's profession, adjusting accordingly then as well. For example, when I used to call attorneys, I would call right before lunch, get the assistant, and have the assistant book me in for a 15-minute call because they bill by the 15-minute interval, right? Book me in for a 15-minute call between 12 and 12:15 so they can still get to lunch and I get a decision quickly. When I called people who are owners of veterinary practices, I called them at 5:15 to 5:30 because all of their clients had already been seen for the day and they're still in doing their paperwork, right? So if you know that person's profession, you want to think about what's the best time to try to reach them. And we are at the point where, I mean, sending an email to try to get a phone call appointment is great, but you don't have time with 2 weeks to go. It's really like dialing for dollars. So just dial relentlessly as much as you possibly can. And I also don't advocate taking the time to leave a message until the last week. So this week, I would still be trying to reach everyone I can without leaving a message, unless you get somebody's office assistant. And then the following week, yeah, go ahead and leave a voicemail when you're in the last few days, because at least they know you tried. And usually that message is, I've tried to reach you by phone a couple of different times. I'm sorry that I kept missing you. I know what, a thoughtful supporter you have been, and I hope that we can count on you to renew your support this year. You should have something in the mail from us, but I'll send you a quick email with a link to our gift page. Done. So that's what I would do. So this is kind of a little, now what? So if you've identified the top asks, make sure those asks are getting scheduled as soon as possible, ideally in person if you're a nonprofit with your local community. And if they don't respond, you can send a letter, but at this point, I would say if we're at June 13th, I would skip that. You want to really focus on the highest level gifts first. So really stick with that, 80-20 rule. So work your way down and work your way from the most loyal outward. So if you want to prioritize your list because there are too many people to call, that's how I would think about it. And again, at this point, it's too late to bother with a solicitation letter, but I would definitely think about how you would schedule that otherwise. And, an email to everyone on June 30th, or you could do even a preview message on the 28th or so, would make a lot of sense. So this going forward, one of the things that I find when I talk to people about this, if they don't have a gift table, build one. And if you don't know how to build one, I bet Marianne, as part of her work with clients, can help you figure that out in terms of figuring out who are good candidates to ask for gifts at different levels and who are your best prospects. But you would start off with thinking about, if you would like to have, I'm going to pick a number out of the air, a $25,000 supporter to your annual fund, and you want to have one of those donors at $25,000, and you are starting from scratch and you have no obvious connection, you need to identify at least 5 individuals or corporate entities or foundations that you could ask for a gift at that level. And then based on asking for that gift, you might be more likely to get it if you just randomly were guessing. And of course, obviously, as you're sending out solicitations through the course of the year, you want to be putting those numbers into your mailings and putting that number out in front of your donors as you're talking to them. So that was a quick synopsis, Marianne. I know you said we go for an hour, so people can throw anything at me at this point, or any reactions or questions. Oh, we are about to launch Greg's course on building a gift pyramid. Excellent. I would tell you that it is the most important tool an annual fund person can possibly have. So if you've never had one, you don't know how to build one, and you want to have one that you can report on, that is the thing. So Greg, good for you. I would do it.
It's actually me that's holding him up. I'm his editor.
No, I still have a couple of things to send to Marianne on that, but no, it will be on sale at our website hopefully pretty soon. So.
Good, that's great. So
Yeah,
sharing so people could throw any other questions at me that they wish about anything.
one of the things that you just said, right? So I'm thinking about how politicians, right? They write to me every day that today, now more than ever, is the time for you to send me $25 so I can defeat random phantom enemy, right? And so the email process of, no, really, we're coming up on June 30th. I agree with you. June 30th is not my deadline to make a gift. My deadline to make a gift is December 31st, right? The second thing I'm thinking is, what's the matter with you people that you can't get your act together, that you waited till now to ask me, right? And I think you hinted at that. And then the third thing is, you know, oh yeah, I got to do that. And then I just go away, right? So I appreciate, one of the pieces of advice I gave the client is, if you guys are going to make phone calls, ask them to fulfill the gift with a credit card, because fulfillment rates are much higher with credit cards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, the other option you can do is to send an email link immediately after. You still have people that, you know, talk to their partners or spouses about their giving. But you do want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. But a credit card is the fastest way to do it. You also, depending on if you have a monthly giving program and you have notorious procrastinators, this is the moment to perhaps suggest that they start to do this monthly for you, because that way you're not having this emergency every single year where you're like, shoot, so-and-so still not remembering to do their gift. If you can get them to a monthly giver, it's not necessarily great for your very top end, right? But your, say, $1,000 donors, what is that, $83.33 a month or something about like that? You know, if you can move them to that place and you have a program like that that has good stewardship already, that can be a lovely way to start to stabilize your membership so you're not in the mad panic either in December or in June. Other things?
I'm glad you mentioned the crowdfunding site not working so well, simply that I can now tell one of my clients who seems to be obsessed with crowdfunding right now, that this is not the best way to get money on a regular basis. I've noticed for very unusual situations, it's a good way to raise money. The client in question, they had a very kind of, and I'm trying to explain this without giving away the identity of the client. They had a very unusually successful and nationally noticed program at their organization, and they wanted to capitalize right away. And so we built a fundraiser. I mean, it was like one of those literal like morning turnarounds where in the morning we decided to do it, and by the afternoon we were advertising it. And we did raise money, but like I say, I think that was just, I don't think that's the sort of thing that will work all the time.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we're all about sustainability. And I had a similar situation. I didn't even end up working with this organization. I chatted with them as a favor to them because I knew the guy who was running it. They similarly had a situation where a very unusual set of circumstances led them to get an outpouring of support for a particular project, including international funding. And they were all excited. And I said, that's awesome. What are you doing with all the names that you got? They had infrastructure to sustain the relationships after they got them. They didn't have the infrastructure to continue to ask. So they had a big kabloom, and then it all just collapsed.
Fortunately, that was actually one thing I did kind of push onto the client and say, you know, we got to make sure that, you know, going forward, say when this program starts again next year, that we go back to those same people. And I think that is going to be a priority for them. But you're right. I think a lot of organizations, you know, they get, you know, they get a money bomb, as it were, and then they don't capitalize that. And the other thing I wanted to say, I'm very glad also that Marianne mentioned the political fundraising, which, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I still remember walking around with my dad a couple of years ago, and his phone kept beeping. And I'm like, who's trying to contact you? Oh, it's all these politicians trying to raise money. I'm like, why are they contacting you every 30 minutes? I mean, do they really think that you're going to give every 30 minutes? You know, so yeah, there are. It does feel like that's kind of like I don't know, almost like harvesting something by burning down a forest or something. You know.
Well, and you raise a good point that I would say to this group about next fiscal year. Keep in mind, usually, when you get into presidential cycles, if you have a phoning program that you support, if you have certain big aggressive outreach efforts you support, really be thoughtful about the timing around the elections and what's going to be going out, because your response rates will drop through the floor for your calling program, and your email response rates will probably drop in the weeks before the election. So if you have the ability to think about the timing of what you deploy and when you deploy it, you're going to want to give some breathing room around the frenzy, for lack of another way of putting it. So, again, not knowing any of who you are working for and what the causes are, be thoughtful about that. If some of you are politically connected, it can perhaps work for you, but you also could get lost in the noise. So do think a little bit about that timing, because we see that in a number of clients. Depending on the kinds of donors they have, you will see a drop in engagement levels with different solicitation vehicles, particularly phoning programs, in that window of election season bonanza, for lack of any other way of putting it. If you're getting spam calls every 2 minutes, you're just not picking up your phone.
Yeah, it just and this is my dad is someone who's very politically interested, and I asked him, why don't you just opt out? He's like, I don't want to do that. Well, then a couple months later, he'd opted out. Even he had kind of reached his the end of his rope. So yeah.
Do I consider LinkedIn to be in the social media realm in your report? Do you have any thoughts about success rates using LinkedIn? I just looked at a study last night, and I will confess I didn't read it as closely as I should have. But what was interesting was that the response rates, the participation of individuals when they say yes was higher, but the reach was much lower. So if you have a tight-knit, committed community in LinkedIn, you may be able to get your message out a little bit more effectively and get a little bit of a higher response rate. But again, we're still talking about point something of a percentage, right? Not direct, even direct mail. If you do direct mail badly, you're still going to get about 2% response. Social is going to be 0.0 or 0.00, depending on how things are going. So where I see LinkedIn being useful, and I bet Marianne could talk about this, is for data mining, because there's been some pretty interesting research showing that individuals with the highest propensity to support their alma mater, one of the characteristics they have in common is that they put their alma mater in their LinkedIn profile as part of one of the things they're connected to. It's part of their brand and their signaling that they do. It's also true for certain nonprofits. If you are connected to that nonprofit through your LinkedIn profile, it also says, again, this is your work persona, right? This is your professional self. So this is your brand that you are representing to the world, and you think that way. So you are really stating this is an organization whose values align with mine, and I'm comfortable representing that. So Marianne, I don't know if you've done work with that, but that's something I have read in the last few years.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, LinkedIn is very careful about letting people touch their data. So we don't, we're not paying the money to get it. And having said that, in 2010, one of the books on how to raise money online was send people badges for your nonprofit to put on their LinkedIn profile, because you want them to be proud of you. So you're talking about, from the tipping point, this would be a connector or a maven, right? The advocate, and it's true. The places that I'm proud to be part of, regardless of whether or not they, put me in a certain box, like, Democrat or female or whatever, are the things that are badged up on my LinkedIn profile. So it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I think that it's also, I've seen a couple of my major gift officers have used LinkedIn as a way of building their brand and identity. I've also seen LinkedIn not used as a communication strategy broadly in their social media strategy, but used specifically for corporate partnerships. So in other words, if you are getting sponsorships and sponsor communications, the strategy is really about ensuring that everything that that company is doing when they are sponsoring your stuff is getting pushed out through that LinkedIn connection, because that again is visible and high value. So it's not necessarily thinking I'm going to do same stuff on all of these different channels, but I'm going to do some specific focus stuff in a certain way with my LinkedIn community specifically.
I think for me, the other thing to think about is I remember, I'm always telling an allegory first to make my point. I remember a program about Japanese commuters, that these people would get on the train and they'd be standing up sleeping. So the guy who was trying to sell newspapers had a really loud thing that he'd go, like louder than the ice cream truck, because he had to be louder than their exhaustion to get their attention to sell a newspaper. I feel like once we get to, like, when we were on Facebook, Facebook was louder because everybody was exciting and new. When Twitter was louder and exciting and new, but all those things have gotten either commonplace or something went, like they got off beat from the music they were playing before. And so now it's like, oh, if I want someone to react to me, I'll talk to them on LinkedIn. Me personally, this might be happening to you too, as our company's brand gets bigger. I'm getting more and more floods of LinkedIn things that, like, I'm an IT company and you need IT people, spam. And so now it's flooding my LinkedIn. So it's harder to say to me, hey, Marianne, can I talk to you through LinkedIn? I'm suspicious again already.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if we think about every single thing that we do, we are always trying to have a one-on-one relationship through a bulk process, right? Every communications channel, the one we're on right now, the reason that this one wins out over some of the other ones, this became so popular, is it's still almost as if we're in a meeting room. All of you have put little hoods over yourself so I can't see you, but the premise would be, I'm looking at you and talking to you in a room, right? So that's why Zoom works as well as it does, is because it's still trying to replicate a personal relationship between people. Direct mail, when it's done at its best, does not look like a mass communication. It makes me feel like I'm the only one receiving that mailing and that it was written just for me and it's personalized to me and it speaks to me. You can only do that when you do pretty sophisticated segmentation. And Marianne, to your point, some of the social media stuff worked when it worked because I was feeling like I was part of a club or a special group and bonded in a certain way. Now we've gotten to a place where we know that we're being exploited and we're getting what we can out of it, and it's become very transactional again. At the very core of every single ask is a relationship. When it shifts to a transaction, we don't have sustainability. So Greg, going back to the issue about crowdfunding, whenever I've done the analysis on this, generally speaking, a crowdfunding project fails because there might be one person, and I know you, and I give to you, and I give to your special thing because, whatever, you're a cancer survivor and we're friends, whatever. But next time that company or that organization comes back and asks me, I have no relationship with them. And so I don't give. So the retention rate on a crowdfunded individual who joins your organization through that site is typically 5% or less. Mm-hmm. I am lazy as a fundraiser. If I'm going to do something, I want to do something where I'm going to keep the donors that I get. And I don't want to put energy into a vehicle where I have a 5% retention rate the second year. If I get you to give by mail the first time, the likelihood is probably closer to 20% that I'm going to get you the next time. So, right? That would make more sense. So it's really important to think about, if you have all that, if you have a lot of resources and a lot of time and a lot of staff, and you can afford to deploy somebody to play in crowdfunding, great. But even then, you're still not going to have that level of sustainability. And you have to create a whole stewardship plan on the back end for every gift. And then next year, you've got to come up with another project. So it's like, great, everybody gave for the sailboat, Yay, we now have the sailboat. No, now we got to come up with something else to buy.
Yeah, the person they had dabbling in crowdfunding was me. So, so yeah. So I think they were just really testing it, and I warned them, this is an incredibly unusual situation, and we should not expect this to ever happen again. And since they were targeting non-donors for this project and raised close to $50,000, I mean, I was happy with that just because that was $50,000 that would never have come any other way.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to be expecting, retention anyway for this particular project. So yeah, but otherwise I told them, we've tried this before. We raised like $200 or $300, and we're not even probably going to get any of those people to give to us next year either. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you have to really think through before you even launch it, if you're going to do it, you have to think about your stewardship of the gift and the purpose and the onboarding. How are you going to on-ramp them after they've made that commitment? And you do have an opportunity to surprise and delight me if you do that, but you've got to be really thoughtful through it. And frankly, most people working for most nonprofits are doing 7 different jobs and don't have time to build all of that stuff into place, which is really unfortunate, but that's the reality we live in, which is why, most of the time when I'm consulting, I'm like, that's nice, throw that out. Why? I'm like, well, that's fun, but there's one of you. And with one of you, you can only do certain things. And so if you're trying to prioritize and you're telling me you have a budget of whatever, $1 million that you have to hit by the end of the year, this thing over here is not going to get you there. And you've got to let that go.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because again, with this client, it was almost like, hey, here's this brand new tool we can use. It's going to save us a lot of time. And it's like, no, it's not going to save you any time. You have to learn how to use the tool. You have to, as you say, you have to follow up on the donors. It's, I think a lot of places get away with selling nonprofits time-saving interventions, which turn out to not save anything at all.
There's all kinds of really fun reporting stuff that are all new shiny objects that are driven, frankly, towards often vice presidents who love shiny object pretty reports. But that is not necessarily the discipline of managing the work underneath the shiny reports. And so they spend, I have had that happen where a client will spend $25,000 on a project that creates some pretty little dashboards. And I'm like, great, these are useless. They don't tell you anything important. And so you just wasted $25,000 that you could have spent on a mailing, on, some support for your staff, any number of things that could have happened with that. And so I am skeptical of shiny objects. They're fine if you have everything else mastered and you're bored, which almost never is the case.
Well, sorry, that's where I want to step in, Maya, because sometimes building that shiny object keeps the vice president distracted so the people can do the core work.
Yes, but usually they just delegate the implementation of shiny object to the rest of the team.
Well, yeah, that's true. They think of more things for the rest of us to do. Yes.
Then it just becomes one more thing you have to manage, which is not, again, part of the strategy. Nobody wants to hear that the hard work is building relationships, setting goals, managing the discipline, and monitoring your outcomes. That's boring, but it's absolutely essential. I find it fun, right? Because I wouldn't keep doing this, but that's the bottom line is every single year, whether it's, for one client or the other, I'm going through who are you going to ask for gifts of $10,000? And everybody doesn't want to do that. I'm like, well, we can't say if we can reach this goal or not until we know who we're asking at every level of the gift table. And if you haven't done that discipline, you're just guessing. You have no knowledge. You're making it up. And that's going to cause you to have a big panic at the end of the year.
So most of our audience today are prospect researchers. And so one of the pieces that you resonated with just now is, we do all this work to say these are the people you should be talking to. And that balking piece that you just described, well, I don't want to call those guys. Well, then why did you sign on for this, frontline big job, right? That piece comes back to research as not enough information, right? And the shiny objects we were just joking about, right? Not enough information. Well, I don't know like how many people give with their left hand instead of their right. So you need to go figure that out, and then I'll think about what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's a really, I mean, it's a really common thing. I call it the security blanket syndrome, right? There are very few people, I mean, asking for money is not a simple thing. It is making you be vulnerable, right? That's the thing, is we as askers feel the most vulnerable in the asking process. I would argue that your donors feel the most vulnerable after they've said yes and they want to find out, what did you do with my gift? We don't
Yep.
always think that way. We're focused on how we feel, right? Because we're humans and that's what we do. And so if you are a prospect researcher and you're giving me a list of names, I know you as the researcher aren't going to ask for this. So you're not putting your head under the guillotine. I am. And if I don't have all of the answers, certain people need all of the answers before they will pick up the phone. And so the security blanket is, fill me with all the data that you can possibly fill me in so that I can feel as prepared as possible, because I want to know every scenario, right? And you see that a lot with organizations where the major gift officer has a very static portfolio they've had for a very long time, where they know what those people ate for breakfast. And so when you start to give me new names and it's like, well, I don't know what they had for breakfast. And I'm not sure, I might not be successful. I might get rejected because I don't know what they had for breakfast. They're going to ask you, you've got to go find out what they had for breakfast, or they won't actually try it. And that is a very hard cultural thing to break, for sure. The evil plot that I have used at times, this is in higher ed, is that I will take a student or a recent graduate or some neophyte that doesn't know any better, isolate them from the major gift officers, and just have them start cranking through the file and starting to get lead initial gifts. And once that gift is made and they're warm, then they're like, oh, I want that gift. Oh, I want that relationship. Oh, I want to do that. And I'm like, fine. And so that's where mid-level giving programs can be invaluable, if you can find somebody who will staff that or use sort of a qualifier to do that pre-work for them, because it is a very different project by its nature. And in many cases, we're asking major gift officers to be something different than they fundamentally are. It's also the case where you sometimes use your annual fund to do that for you as well, right? Because if an annual fund person gets a $5,000 gift, then all of a sudden all the major gift teams like, whoop, 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 give me, right? So there can be a lovely partnership where if you're like, I really think this is good, short of somebody who's way up in the Warren Buffett echelon, where we're never going to get there unless we deploy the senior management strategy, that can be a way to work around it.
And the royalty. Yeah. Actually, you and I worked with a gift officer who was a former Olympian. And I don't know if you remember him, Kayak. Maybe he came on after you left Cornell, but that man would get, he'd drive up a mountain in Washington State, get stuck in the snow, hang out with a client for 2 days, come back down when the snow was better, and he got the gift. And I often joke about when I was at Carnegie Mellon, it's a competitive place. It's very sciencey, engineering, technically. So I would tell one gift officer that the other one got a gift because they accepted our new prospect and they loved it. So yes, I agree that finding the thing that says, this is way more exciting than your hesitation about the rejection.
Yeah.
Is the best way to motivate.
I'm seeing a comment here. I heard a podcast about how we tend to add more, but real value can come from looking at not doing something. Do you have success in doing less? I was intrigued by the concept. So as our officers are always so busy. Yes, I call this the Marie Kondo concept, right? She's always talking about, like, if you're going to clean out your closet, right, you throw out the stuff that you don't need. And it is super hard. I mean, if we think about how gift officers are wired inherently to please, and pleasing people is pleasing your vice president, pleasing your donors, pleasing your organization, right? And so we want to say yes to everyone. So the idea of no and walking away from something is inherently wired the wrong way, right? So it's very difficult to do this. But one of my partners in Boston, she just did an exercise with her colleagues where they had a little strategic plan where for every new idea they came up with, they had to throw out an old one, which is sort of the same Marie Kondo concept is if you're going to buy a new sweater, you've got to get rid of the old one that you don't need, right? You're going to replace one for the other. And so if you can get an organization to truly evaluate what is generating the most, which is why I did that circle of the efficacy. I'll say to a nonprofit, and I just did this morning, stop doing the social media nonsense. There is one person, they do not have time. I need a mailing to go out because that's going to generate 50% of your operating revenue. So if I have to choose where you're going to deploy your energy, you're going to stop doing social media and you're going to put in direct mail. That's just, we have to look at efficacy. So if you can look at what is it that people are doing that is a waste of time, things like golf tournaments, things like events, many events are a giant epic waste of time. If you can't tell me its purpose and you can't say it's for cultivation and I'm going to solicit these people within 18 months of when I actually do it, or it's for stewardship because these donors are going to give more in another cycle after I'm ready. If there's not a clear purpose and people try to mash 5 per pie into it, then you probably don't have an effective event that makes any sense. So people get distracted by silly technologies, stupid events that are not efficient, but we've always done them. Those need to go away. And necessarily, yes, thank you. I hate events a lot. And even stewardship events, because what I'll say is, you look at your donors, you say, oh, but we're recognizing our donors. And I'm like, well, look, here's the data set. You got 1,000 members, just picking a number, 200 of them ever come to the event. You put all your time and energy and resources into it. 800 of them aren't coming. What are you doing for them? Diddly squat. Well, guess what? No wonder your pool is shrinking because you're not stewarding them because you're not putting anything in there. So, oh, thank you, Ruthie. I appreciate it. It's really about evaluating from a data outcomes perspective, pointing out what needs to go and walking away. The problem is there are lots of people that really don't have even when you show them the data, they don't always have the discipline or the will to do it. And in those cases, you've got to wait till the politics change, right? Wait till a position changes. And then you're like, great, go out and kill it then. But sometimes it's a sacred cow until such time as the culture changes. Yes, and they comp so many tickets. Yes, there's so many issues with events. Hate them, hate them, hate them. I have actually had several clients where we've killed the gala and the gala went away and we raised more money in the subsequent year. The board had a fit, fought me, but I'm a consultant, right? So I'm allowed to say these things. And then they finally acquiesced because the consultant said yes. And then the next year we raised and, we went up by 10 or 15%. And I'm like, thank you. I understand that you were going to fight me every step of the way, but because we redeployed the time from a gala to things that actually matter, which are relationships, we raised more money.
So we have about 6 minutes left. If anybody has any last minute questions, and Maya, would you like to share a little bit about your business in case someone here could use support?
Sure. So Westwind Consulting is based in Ithaca. We are a firm that does work nationally. I do spend a fair amount of my time in annual funds because that was 50% of my professional life. But the other 50% of my life was doing other parts of fundraising. So our firm actually does work with campaigns and we do campaign planning and feasibility. Probably what's different about our firm than many others is one, we work with a smaller number of clients. I have more than once heard from a client saying, I don't even know that you work with other people because I feel like you're only focused on us. And that is the experience that I want someone to have. The other thing is that we tend to be extremely customized. I am the child of an engineer and a teacher. So I try to figure out how to fix a problem or series of problems, and also how to teach you how to create the culture and the sustainable organization that you have to carry it going forward. Because there's nothing worse than working through something and then have it all collapse the minute you walk away. Typically, our firm will work with a client for a couple of years. On a diminishing basis. So it's like we get the bird, we build the nest, we help the bird have the eggs, and we help the bird get the baby birds to fly. And then we're kind of still around as a flying coach, and then we're done. So that to me is a different model, but it's oriented towards longer term, more sustainable success. So anybody interested in reaching out to me, happy to chat about whatever you might need. And even if I can't help, I usually will try to help you find someone who can, because at the end of the day, I am about nonprofits first and foremost.
That exactly aligns with the Stop Hell value set. So thank you for restating that in such a clear way. And Maya's contact information will be on our website, right below the replay. Okay. So yeah, so the next Stop Hell event is the water cooler chat next month. Greg is going to talk about, now that the year is over, you're going to have to do some cleanup stuff, right? Because as Maya well knows, like on June 30th, you've hit goal, everybody's celebrating. When Maya worked with the full-time staff, if each team met their goal, they got to pitch her into the lake. She used to put the lake temperature up on her door and to her office. So whoever met that goal that day got to pitch Maya into the lake. So you notice that I have not offered that to anybody at Stop Hell. But July 1st, bam, you're at 0. And so you've got to get started again.
We don't have lakes out here in Tucson, so that wouldn't really work.
We would have to pitch Greg into the sand. And what will be the point of that? He's already in there.
Oh, but what an important topic, honestly. I try to make sure people really understand the whole element of personalization is really around the discipline of good data and good data hygiene. And that's the moment to do it. So I think that's a great session.
When all the gift officers run away for vacation, exhausted.
Yeah, I was about to say, while the gift officers are in, Hawaii or wherever they go on vacation, and those of us who don't go on vacation are stuck at the office, this is a great time to do data auditing. In fact, I'm doing this for a number of clients right now. In fact, data auditing. So
yeah.
So yes, I hope to see some of you at next month's session.
So Maya, thank you so much for forfeiting your lunch. Or at a very minimum, having to wait. We appreciate you, and I look forward to any collaborations we all have in the future.
Good. Have a good fiscal year end, everybody.